Okay, I call this public meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection for our servicemen and women throughout the world, and also for those who have passed away in our community. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Dr. Rothchild? Here. Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Mr. Donahue?
Here. Dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A, single tax office city funds distributed dated December 31st, 2021. 3B, correspondence from the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board dated January 12th, 2022 regarding the city's request for exemption from its enforcement of amplified noise.
Are there any comments on any third order items? If not, received and filed. Do any council members have any announcements at this time?
Yes, I have two. First, I just wanted to announce that I think they were released a day early. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but as of now, you could go to online to get a free COVID test mailed to your home. That's something that President Joe Biden had announced that the government would be doing, is providing those home tests for anyone who wants them, but they're not going to automatically send them to you. You do have to sign up, provide them with your address, and request them. Every home in the country is eligible for up to 4 of those at-home tests, and they usually ship between 7 and 12 days, and the website that you can go to order those is at covidtests.gov. And then the other announcement that I had is that the city's announced that the HUD funding applications are now open, and they'll accept applications up until February 4th. So that's for the CDBG, home, and HESG applications. And they're a little bit different this year because there's a new software that OECD is using for those applications called Neighborly, which could be accessed through our city's website. And these would provide, the funds would provide support for the development of viable urban communities through quality housing and expanding economic opportunities for persons of low and moderate income. And that's for the CDBG. The HESG funds would be for emergency shelters for the homeless and other programs to prevent homelessness. And this is the time of year certainly where we need emergency shelters. And then home provides funds to expand this supply of safe, decent, affordable housing for low-income Americans. And for any questions regarding those programs, you could contact Liza Carroll at lcarroll@scrantonpa.gov or Kelly Cracer at kcracer@scrantonpa.gov. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any announcements?
Yes, Mr. President. Due to the MLK holiday on Monday, garbage pickup, DPW garbage pickup will be a day late this week. Just want to remind citizens of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any announcements? Mr. Voldenberg?
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
First one on the sign-in sheet is Joan Hodowanitz.
Joan Hodowanitz, Scranton resident. I want to start by complimenting the city and DPW in particular and the rapid way they cleaned up at least the downtown streets yesterday morning. I live on the corner of Penn and Lackawanna in Samters, and of course all night long you can hear the wind blowing downtown. But around 2 o'clock or so, I hear rumble, 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 and there's plow trucks going up and down both Penn Avenue and Lackawanna. Went to Mass that morning, and then Abe's for breakfast, came out of Abe's, and pretty much the downtown streets were in pretty good shape, all things considered. Of course, sidewalks were awful, but that's not DPW's job. So I think, you know, they should be congratulated. Everybody else had the day off, and they were there at 2 o'clock in the morning, rumbling down the street. Do we have an update on the 2020 audit?
We have still not received it. I'm hoping by the end of this week.
Okey dokey. And the collective bargaining agreements for the police and firefighters, which expired at the end of last year, are they still in negotiations?
Yes.
Okay, are they kind of on track? No big
I believe so,
rumors?
yes.
Okay. And that's about all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person on the sign-in sheet is Norma Jeffries.
That caught me by surprise, Joe. That's a short presentation. Norma Jeffries, a Scranton resident, and I want to say welcome to Attorney Gallagher, Solicitor Gallagher, and to Bill King, and to we're off to a good start for 2022. I wanted to start off by saying that what a responsibility I have and anyone has as we stand here and give our thoughts and concerns about issues with the city. They always talked about the power of the pen, but it's the power of the microphone as well. So there's certain things, as I wasn't here for this meeting, but there's certain things that were said that I thought, that's not right, that's not right. And I thought, okay, if it's not right, then you've got to get up there and say what is right. Because when people are talking and they're giving they're entitled to their concerns and their voice. So the speaker had said that why is Scranton call Nailed Park the gem of the city? Well, now my cackles and my hair went up when they said it's not a gem of the city. So I thought, yes, it is. So it's no good with me talking to the TV. So I made a list of what goes on up at Nailed Park. We start in October. We start out by saying, calling for volunteers to help us to get ready for the light show. We ask the volunteers to come up. They don't get paid. It's just all volunteer. From November to January. Then in December, we're calling for volunteers. And volunteers come up in the cold of the night and volunteer to help us make this light show a gem of the city. Then in January and February, we're busy thinking, what are we going to do for the rest of the year? In February, we had a food drive, which was very successful. I think we had 4 food pantries that were helped and stocked with the food that was collected at Nailed Park. Then in March and April, we start thinking about the summer. What are we going to do for the summer to get it ready? Then we had a baby drive on Mother's Day so that the mothers could have, that needed things from St. Joseph's Center. And we had a baby drive. Then we went into thinking about the summer concerts. We have Wednesday concerts. We have 2 concerts on Sunday afternoon. That takes a lot of work to get those bands up there. Who's going to be there? What time are they going to be at? Then in May through October, from May to October, that's when the bands play. During the summer, we had a kids outing. We had all the kids, we put out the word for the kids to come to the park, and we had a day in the park of art. We gave each family a bucket of chalk that they could make art throughout the concrete portion of the park. There was little things that we gave them too as well. Then we had arts and crafts shows where the park was open for all people to see the park. And then we move on to all the other activities that go on in the park. There's the greenhouse. The greenhouse is there that I go over there for their senior activities, and they have yoga, and there's Mother's Day, is spring, there's flowers and everything over there. You go down the trail a little bit further, there's the St. Cats and Dog, where you can take your animals to get them neutered, and all that you can find on the website. And then the trails. You know, there's all kind of walking trails. I do the very easy ones. And if you're really into a robust walker, you know, there's a Davis Trail is right there that goes down past the falls and everything. And then to rest yourself, you can go to the coffee house and rest with a cup of coffee or any kinds of things or treats that you want. So I've got 30 seconds to say thank you to everybody that comes and makes our gym of the city a gym, to the rec department employees, to DPW, to our volunteers. I can't say a big enough thank you for all the volunteers that come to help us make the city, Nayout Park, the gym that it is. And it's all volunteer, and the donations that come into the park. And that's what I had to say. The other thing, I know I'm out of time, but I sent you all an email on the other thing that I thought someone said up here that was not true.
All right,
Okay.
Thank you. And Ms. Jeffries, thank you for volunteering up the park too. We'd be remiss if we didn't thank you for the time you put in there. I know you're a loyal volunteer up there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, Tom Coyne.
Greetings, members of council. Tom Coyne, Manuka. I was going to bring up the being able to request early the COVID-19 testing kits from the government. And unfortunately, I tried to request mine, and it seems my address was already used. There's only me at the address, so it's kind of hard for that to be. I think it's a matter of, unfortunately, this rollout, which is still in its beta phase, is being done by the U.S. Post Office. Unfortunately, my mother in Philadelphia, who travels to Florida, 2 years ago used my address as a temporary mail drop. This has long since changed, and she actually used her Philadelphia address, where she lives in as a resident, as her shipping for the COVID supply test. So I have no idea why an address in Scranton was set out as already receiving it, when obviously there's me there and that's it, and no one else at the residence. So there is some difficulty with that site, as well as the fact that when you go on that site and you run into an error, it goes through a help section that tells you to just re-enter in the information and try it again. And then if you need further help, it loops you back to the first page where you go to enter the information again. It seems a circle, and I understand that the federal government is going to be putting out a phone number for it, but right now there is some complications with that site, and I expect some of them to be taken and fixed in the near future, but it is not a perfect rollout. Next, I wanted to talk about the request for an exemption, the residency exemption. When the person was hired from out of the city, they were informed as part of that hiring process they had to move into the city within 6 months. When they don't and an exemption is given, it is a reward for non-compliance. We talk about, well, maybe they'll just pay taxes instead of the taxes that they would have to pay in the city, rather than having to move into the city. I can tell you, if I live in the city, I'm going to buy gasoline in the city, I'm going to buy groceries in the city, I'm going to shop nearby. If I live in Clark Summit, or I live in Wilkes-Barre and work in the city, I'm not going to buy groceries here. I'm not going to buy food. I'm not going to supply the merchants here. All of my money is going to go to Wilkes-Barre except for the tax fee. So it's not just the taxes that come in from having the employee work in the city of Scranton. It's the taxes plus all the revenue to those businesses who have been severely impacted by COVID. They are getting a cut of the taxpayers' dollars here to perform a function. Part of the function is living in the community, which supplies the community with financial support by them being here. I also look at that and I go, if you give an exemption to them at this point, what about the fire department? What about the police department? If a policeman says he's going to move here in 6 months and then decides not to, are you setting up a precedent where he can then request, and he should get it? Because if a political person can get it, why shouldn't a union fireman or policeman or anyone else? There's a problem when you go and you make modifications and exceptions to the law when someone signed on to the agreement who said, I will do this within this period of time. I understand COVID. I understand limited housing. I also understand a number of people have purchased an apartment or a unit down here just to move into so they could be in compliance while they dealt with their move. It's not an impossible function to do. I think it was done as a tactful thing to get the employee in, and I cannot say it was maliciously made, but at this point, they should be held accountable for the promise they made when they took the job. I do not care how it is and how good of an employee it is. It's not the fact of the job they do. It's the responsibilities to the taxpayers and the law that they agreed to when they took the position. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council?
Hello, Council. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Donahue and Council for addressing a problem I've had in my neighborhood. And I just wonder if anybody out there is better off today than they were a year ago. Everybody I talk to is complaining about everything. I was going to put these on, but they get all fogged up, you know. For some reason, nobody ever wants to borrow these. I saw on Fox News that the children don't want to wear masks because their glasses fog. That's a problem. I don't know what they could do. In Saturday's paper, a gentleman, I think his name was Mike Carton, wrote one of the few intelligent letters I ever seen in the last 4 years to the editor. He states that the law is you have to read, speak, and write English in order to vote, to become a citizen. Now our mayor's wasting $500,000 for interpreters. Interpreters. You never go get people to assimilate when you make it easy for them to stay like they are. This is an asinine liberal thing to do. I'm not an anti-immigrant. All 4 of my grandparents came, I don't know, like 100 years ago, came to this country. And as I was growing up, everybody spoke, read, and could write English. My grandfather came when he was 16, and when I was real small, he used to read me the funny papers, so he was a young man. His wife came from Poland, and she used to write letters to her sister in Baltimore, and I used to mail them. She wrote perfect English. And my other 2 grandparents came from Germany. They had no accents. They lived in Chicago. They just sounded like everybody else because they wanted to be Americans, the opposite of what's happening in this country now. every time I go to Peanuts, they buy peanuts every week over at Price Right. It just, people that can't speak English got all kinds of food stamps. They got nicer cars than I do. I see on the Fox News all the Afghanistans are staying in 4-star hotels. They have interpreters. They're supposed to be the interpreters, and they have to have interpreters. They're eating the fancy restaurants. This country is getting everything backwards. You know, if it was up to me, I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-illegal immigrants. If it was possible, I'd take every last one of them and round them up and ship them back where they came from. It's just heartbreaking to see what's happened to this country in the past year. It's a disgrace. You know, it's not the America that I grew up in. And I talked to my 6 or 8 friends on the computer and on the telephone every week. 2 of them are staunch Democrats, and they started leaning this way, that the country's not going in the right direction. One of them's worked for the government all his life. He's Lewis Murray. That's the only thing he's ever done is be in our government. I had to take my Trump sticker off my car 4 years ago when we met to play golf, so I wouldn't offend him. Now he's thinking my way. Thank you for giving me a few minutes up here.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
thank
Elman.
you for last week when you informed me.
No problem, thank you. Have
Bye.
a good night. Would anyone else like to address council?
Marie Schumacher. I'm going to start where I ran out of time last week, because I did want to acknowledge the Recreation Authority and all of the volunteers that put, I don't know how many hours, if they should have kept track of them, because with all the lights that were there, I was amazed. I didn't get there until I think the second from the last night, but we was sort of nice because we were able to go around twice but it was very beautiful, and they do deserve something. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you could do something for them, or, I don't know. And also for the DPW, for the job they've been doing on the snow removal and salting. But then there's something else. I thought, you know, for the last, well, since I came back to Scranton, there's only been one goal for this city, and that was to get out of Act 47. And now that we're getting out of Act 47, I think we need a new goal, maybe annual goals. But we need something that is measurable at the end of the year, other than just, you know, we had enough revenue to cover the expenses and, you know, pin a ribbon on us. We need something more, and I'm very worried about the rescue dollars. We've already taken, 5.5 away for balancing the budget, and as I recall, almost every item in the capital budget had, that was going to be the source of the funding. So I'm just worried it's going to get trickled away, and I think you should first request of the mayor some kind of agreement on when you're going to decide where the money is going to be spent. And I think you should also have a public hearing on that. Once you make an estimate, I think people should be allowed to come in and comment on how that's going to be done. And Also, I mean, my own item would be infrastructure and stormwater. I mean, I don't know how stormwater can get kicked, that can get kicked down any further than it's been. It's just pitiful. And do we have any encouragement on when something's going to happen?
Yes, so there's still ongoing meetings with multiple municipalities in discussions about...
SAPA and...
No,
yeah.
not only SAPA, but in discussions about creating a regional stormwater authority. And I think that the ARPA money will be helpful not only to the city, but also surrounding municipalities in terms of startup money to get that going.
Okay, and when do you think that will be known to the public?
I mean, we're just in the initial stages of discussions on, you know, what it would look like, what responsibilities would be, but once all that gets worked out, I'm hoping that gets worked out in the next couple months.
Okay, well,
And then we could get into the meat of, you know, what rate structures would look like and so on.
I would like to request that you put your minds around a strategic plan for this year, and maybe even 3 years. It would change, obviously, for the out years. But I do think we need metrics. I think we could use some metrics at the departments where there are measurable kinds of work. Some of them aren't, of course, but it would be nice.
And I'm hoping the transition into OpenGov, the new operating system, will give us more opportunity for more metrics in terms of being able to see what each department's doing.
Well, yes, and, you know, it wouldn't hurt, each of you has a certain part of the city. It wouldn't be, maybe take turns of what's happening and where the bumps are and where the road is smooth ahead. I think that would be very helpful, and people would care more about the city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council?
Good evening, Council. Dave Dobson, resident, taxpayer. Okay, last week I spoke about the redistricting, and you may have one more day to get in touch with the Pennsylvania election board and oppose some of the slicing up of the Scranton pie, and voice your concerns about it. I plan to do so. Last week, they basically rammed it through on Wednesday, and our Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided that that shouldn't have been done, so we got a little reprieve there. The governor came out with his plan today, which sounds a lot fairer, but I don't know how it affects the state legislative assembly. So why we should be split up 4 ways is beyond me. It's totally ridiculous, and it does concern Scranton. It's really a shame, and then furthermore, we have Dan Newser possibly representing Scranton. He voted against certifying the presidential election. I mean, I don't want his representation at all, and that's all there is to it. You know, he won't be my representative, and I know he probably doesn't care about what I think. On COVID, we're up to 850,000. It's time people wake up, because we have a plague of the unvaccinated or whatever, and it's really a shame. It's really a shame that people just won't get a vaccination. I've had mild reactions to it, but I'll take 2 more. They're small, just like when I used to drink bourbon. Just like when I used to drink bourbon. I'll take 2 more, they're small. And I mentioned on Colfax now, I guess there's only one more hangout. I think it's the 300 block or the 400 block. She wants a house similar to what the quality house. But that's all money going off the tax rolls, and we really need to start having that replaced someday. So I don't know if you people will get the disdain of the representatives and people involved with Pennsylvania government, but it's really high time. We can't go 37, 38, 40% more taxes, tax exempt properties. It's just too much. It's way too much, and it services the county and it services beyond the county, because the type of specialists, I don't think you would have them up in Pike County. You know, if you needed a cardiologist or something like that, you might get a meeting in an office, but you're not going to get a surgery or an intervention surgeon. You're just not going to see it. So those people have to be housed here. And it's the same with Susquehanna County and probably Wyoming County. And they have hospitals, but they're not mega hospitals that can have a big variety of people. And I support expanding medical coverage because I don't want to live in the country no more. I lived there for years. I spent all kinds of time sitting on my ditty box in the car to get home. And if something happened to me, I'd probably just die in the ambulance on the way. So we really need to look at somehow we can get these taxes. And one of the things I've mentioned before was TV recycling. I mean, it's illegal to put it on your lawn, and it's illegal to throw it in the garbage, and they're just hanging around. And one more quick thing I have noticed since this mail order business, box after box after cardboard box sitting out for the trash with Amazon and all these, and I mean, it's big. So
Thank
we
you.
really need to start, just tell the DPW to leave them behind.
Thank
Let
you.
them get them where they belong. Thank you.
And I believe, just on the TV recycling, I believe the city is going to be scheduling a recycling event for sometime in the spring.
Sure. that
Once
would
we
be
get
great.
more details, we'll let you know on that.
I'd be perfectly willing to pay to get rid of them, but I keep tripping over
Yeah.
them. Thank you, PPNL, for blowing them up.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address council? Mr. Voldenberg?
Fifth order, 5A motions.
Mr. King, do you have any comments or motions?
Yeah, so we'd just like to mention that 5F, the appointment of Daniel King, that's my nephew. I will be abstaining from that. I do understand that it's really just a non-paying position just in case the tax collector were to become incapacitated, but I still think it's appropriate for me to abstain from that vote this evening. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schuster, do you have any motions or comments?
The only comment I'd like to make is just to thank DPW for the work during the snowstorm. Other than that, I'll mention it on the question if I have any comments.
Thank you. Dr. Rothchild, do you have any motions or comments?
Yes, I just had 2 things that I wanted to request Mr. Voldenberg to check up on their complaints that I've previously brought to OECD and to LIPS. There were 2 properties that I had been asking about last year in 2021. One is on the 600 block of Prescott Avenue. I think last we heard we were going to see if that was going to go onto the demolition list or not, and I wanted to ask about what's being done with that property now, if it is on the demo list. And then the other property was at Vine and Prescott, which was the Vine Street station where the abandoned vehicle was removed, but there still is plenty of blight there at that property still. And that's everything that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McAndrew, any motions or comments?
Yes, I have two, thank you. So, a few concerned residents brought to me issues with Ryerson Avenue. Back in 2000, so they also sent me an article back in 2018. There was an article about the wall on Ryerson Avenue. You know, it's leaning over the retaining wall, holding up Ryerson Avenue in Scranton. So along with that article, I guess nothing's been done. The parking is atrocious. Plows can't get by it. It's very unsafe, so it's a safety issue. That's why I'm really hitting this one home. They're concerned our DPW trucks, is it safe for them to come through? They're not sure if they even do, or they back up. They're afraid of the wall collapsing. And what I would like, and I don't know if this is part of the overall Meadowbrook project, so what I would like, Mr. Voldenberg, if you would please send correspondence, send it, I don't know, send it to everybody. Send it to the LIPS department, send it to DPW, send it to the police department because it's a safety issue, asking if we can get some type of assessment, and are there any corrective action plans in place for this narrow street, the unsafe collapsing wall, and is it part of the plan for Meadowbrook? And secondly, Mr. Coyne last week, he spoke to us about retention, of email retention. So I asked Mr. Voldenberg to please inquire about if we're in compliance, and if we're not, why, and any information regarding that. What do we have in place? The only response I got, I didn't get any response as to are we in compliance or why we aren't in compliance. What I got was, at this time, we have no specific, this is from Mr. Dealey, no specific retention policies beyond the city's ordinance for document retention. And like, you know, we hear that it's moving forward. So in closing, he put it's on our to-do list for 2022. So, Mr. Coy, that's all I got for you at this point. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And just on that point, it is important to point out that we do retain everything that's applicable under law in terms of ordinances. It's the emails where we don't, or email retention where we don't have a policy. But any ordinances, minutes, anything of that nature is retained according to either state law or city ordinance. In terms of Ms. Schumacher's comments regarding ARP, so the final rules were just released last week in terms of how ARP money could be spent. I think the final rules come out to about 400 pages. So our consultant that was hired for ARP funding is going through those and then determining, you know, what that money could be spent on. And just moving forward, I would like to have a public hearing. I mean, that stuff's going to have to be brought in front of council. In terms of the 5.1 that was put into our budget this year, you're right, that did cover, for the most part, our capital improvements in the 2022 budget. Then plus a little more, but there was a formula that the federal government came out with to determine that for every year. So our lost revenue for this year is a little over, that we have available to spend is a little over 11 million, because that accounts for lost revenue in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So that's 3 years combined, where then the other 8 million would be 23, 24, and I believe 25. Separated out, you know, so that was taken initially out of the 34.5 that we got in our first batch, and we are anticipating another 34.5. And we do still have to see what type of funds we're going to get from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was also passed, because that will be additional money we should receive there as well. And also, Ms. Schumacher, I believe you brought up, I don't think it was last week, but before last year, about the Chamber of Commerce with the LERTA. So there are digital billboards, and conventional billboards were updated in May 2021. I think you were referring to the digital advertisement that goes around the chamber building. We were informed today that that has been corrected as of this morning. We also had received some complaints regarding 1068 Cottage Avenue, and then I know that code enforcement went out last week, and actually on January 13th, that property was condemned. So at least they're moving through that portion of the process there. And I believe that's all I have. Mr. Voldenberg?
5B, for introduction, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter any and all documents necessary to allow the Pennsylvania American Water Company to obtain a deed of easement and right-of-way to construct, operate, and repair a water line in the vicinity of Ash Street and Richter Avenue.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5C, for introduction, a resolution accepting a donation from Steve Dodge, 648 Highland Road, Dalton, Pennsylvania, in the amount of $30 to the City of Scranton Police K-9 unit.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5D, for introduction, a resolution accepting a donation from Marie Bannicky, 714 Clay Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18510, in the amount of $100 to the City of Scranton Police K-9 unit.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5D be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question, all those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5E, for introduction, a resolution accepting a donation presented to the City of Scranton Fire Department from Greg L. Sunday and Joan M. Sunday in the amount of $5,000 in memory of Scranton firefighter Stephen Sunday for the purchase of equipment.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5E be introduced into its proper committee.
moved. Second.
On the question,
On the question, I'd just like to say that it's wonderful. This motion and the past two motions, well, of course, the appearance of firefighter Sunday, this generous donation, but the other two that, they're just private citizens out here that every year, and I've noticed this every year, that support the fire department and the police department in such a nice and kind manner. That's all I have.
thank you. Anyone else? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5F, for introduction, a resolution, appointment of Daniel King, 116 Oswald Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18505, to the position of Deputy Tax Collector for the Scranton Single Tax Office, effective immediately.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5F be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? On the question, I just want to point out that this is an appointment that's made by Tax Collector Kathy Weschler, who just began her first term, to fill a requirement of the local tax collection law. This is not a paid position, and it's basically only a safeguard in the event that the tax collector cannot adequately perform their duties for any reason, so that, you know, payments could be remitted, tax bills could be sent out, and so forth. And I just think it's important to point out that it's not a paid position, it's really just a safeguard. Anyone else? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye. Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, reading by title, file the council number 1, 2022, an ordinance amending file the council number 58, 2021, as amended, the code of the city of Scranton governing peddling and soliciting within the city of Scranton by further amending the Administrative Code, Section 340-13A, to decrease the fee to 20% of its original value due to the COVID-19 pandemic by further extending the time period until December 31st, 2022, due to the ongoing COVID pandemic.
You've heard reading by title of item 6A. What is your pleasure?
Chairman, I move that item 6A pass reading by title.
Second?
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
6B, reading by title, file the council number 2, 2022, an ordinance entitled amending file the council number 10, 2020, an ordinance as amended entitled authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to grant a special encroachment permit to city retail businesses and restaurants to operate on city right-of-ways to extend the time period until December 31st, 2021, to further extend the time period until December 31st, 2022, due to the ongoing COVID pandemic.
You've heard reading by title of item 6B. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that item 6B pass reading by title.
Second?
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
6C, reading by title, file the council number 3, 2022, an ordinance entitled providing for the levy and collection of a license for all performers, entertainers, sporting teams, musical groups, bands, theatrical casts, dancing groups, recital groups, paid lecturers, and speakers by increasing fees to reduce the one-day fee in Section 3 from $50 to $20 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to extend the time period for the reduction for the 2022 calendar year.
You've heard reading by title of item 6C. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that item 6C pass reading by title.
Second?
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
6D, reading by title, file the council number 4, 2022, an ordinance establishing a no parking zone at 550 Plaza at 550 Clay Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, from the beginning of the southern driveway north to the intersection with Olive Street.
You've heard reading by title of item 6D. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that item 6D pass reading by title.
Second?
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
6E, reading by title, file the council number 5, 2022, an ordinance authorizing the creation of an event license to alleviate the direct expense to peddlers and imposing an event license fee schedule to decrease the fees due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to further extend the period for the 2022 calendar year.
You've heard reading by title of item 6E. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that item 6E pass reading by title.
Second?
On the question? On the question, just to point out, we did pass another reduction in the fee of the yearly fee in terms of these ordinances, and we will be getting that next week to also reduce the yearly entertainment fee, not just the daily entertainment fee. That was one that was missing coming down, but we will be getting that next week, just to point that out. Anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for adoption, Resolution Number 2, 2022, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials for the city of Scranton to execute and enter into an agreement with the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development to provide the city with an equity plan.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chairperson for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Second?
On the question?
On the question, I'd just like to thank Mr. Voldenberg for getting the information on the other bidder for me today. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes. I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 3, 2022, appointment of Andrew T. Lizella, Ph.D., of 505 Colfax Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18510, as a member of the Board of Ethics for a term expiring on August 31st, 2022.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Second?
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes. I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution Number 4, 2022, amending Resolution Number 36, 2020, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to waive the residency requirements for Eileen Cipriani in her capacity as Executive Director of the Office of Economic and Community Development for the City of Scranton under certain conditions, to extend the time period for the waiver of the residency requirement.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second?
On the question?
On the question, so last week, I'd like to reiterate the reason why I'm voting no for the extension of this waiver. I also said it's nothing personal with Mrs. Cipriani, but I believe it's personal with the hundreds of other employees that have to live in the city to work in the city. With a population of 70,000 people, I truly believe that we could find someone with the skill set and capability to do the job for this position. I believe in growing our own, so to speak. So, again, I'll be voting no for this.
Anyone else?
Also on the question, last year when this waiver came up, there was some, I'm usually against the waivers, but when it came up last year, I made a recommendation or request that Ms. Cipriani pay the city taxes. Also, keep the length of the term as to that of the mayor. The administration did comply with my stipulations for this, and it is enumerated in this resolution. So as long as that continues, I would be in favor of this.
Thank you. I also think it's important to point out that Ms. Cipriani's wages aren't necessarily paid by city taxpayers. They come in and they're paid through federal funds. So I think that's an important distinction there. Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
No.
Mr. Donahue.
Yes. I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted.
8th order, 8A, no business at this time.
If there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.